The woke market has crashed. Read the room.
They knew who they were going to piss off.
Why would you have a corporate goal to piss off consumers?
Listen, I don't own a car.
This idea that all publicity is good publicity is not true, because Bud Light got a lot of publicity and they also lost about 30% of the value of their shares.
People are taking the lyrics of Defying Gravity and really holding space with that.
That's really powerful.
A green-skinned woman is mocked, bullied, and humiliated because of her skin color. A green-skinned woman.
Yeah.
There is no such thing.
I did see it with my wife. It's the ninth circle of hell for me.
With political hostilities paused for Thanksgiving, our focus turns to those for whom there is no seasonal respite, celebrities and ultra-woke corporate lunatics. We begin with premium car maker Jaguar. As you have that has been billed as so ludicrous that it seems almost purpose-made to generate a debate about it. No driving, no roads, no cars. It looks more like the Norwegian entry for Eurovision Song Contest than a campaign by a luxury motor brand. The backlash has been as amusing as, frankly, I would say is justified. This parody promises the Jaguar ad, but with 100% more Jaguars. And there's been plenty of that, although it has to be said that from an awareness point of view, everyone in the world now knows that Jaguar has a new campaign out and it's been viewed hundreds of millions of times on social media. Well, Jaguar's managing director, Rawdon Glover, told the Financial Times that criticism has been driven by vile hatred and intolerance. Has it, or is it another example of what I would call the virtue-signalling death spiral that brought us Me Too Gillette and Dylan Mulvaney's Bud Light? Here to discuss all this and more from the Nerdrotic YouTube channel, pop cultural critic Gary Beekler, the Uncensored regular contributor Esther Krakue, and the man who can always be relied upon to defend the indefensible when it comes to all things woke, author of the case for cancel culture, Ernest Owens. Ernest, let me start with you on this one, because it's become a bit of a laughingstock, this Jaguar ad. What's interesting to me is, and full disclosure, I used to be an ambassador for Jaguar like 15 years ago, when they, literally got a nice Jag to drive around, and I felt pretty cool in my nice smart sports car. This is obviously a radical departure from anything they've done before. Is there, a genuine question, is there method to the madness? I mean, they're appealing, it seems to be, to a community which I would not normally think would rush out and buy Jaguars. Are they going to?
I think that, to be honest, the fact that we're even talking about it means that they've done what they want to achieve. I think that the marketing idea behind it was brilliant because they knew who they were going to piss off. And I think that, to be honest, that was the goal. I mean, we haven't been talking about Jaguar.
Why is the
in a
goal to
while.
piss off
I
your
forgot about the
consumers?
car.
Why would you have a corporate goal to piss off consumers? I'm curious.
I mean, some consumers. I mean, listen, I don't own a car, but I found it interesting. I definitely did. I think the fact that people are talking about it is going to introduce more people to the brand.
But they're not talking about it for the right reason,
the people on
are
this
they?
call are not going to like it.
Yeah, but
I know people are not going to like it. I know you're not going to like it. But I think some people thought it was funny and creative and different. But the fact that you all are even talking about it excels the point.
Look,
like,
to be fair,
this is exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, to be fair, look.
It's so iconoclast that this is what they wanted.
Okay, Esther, I mean, to be fair, Jaguar is a very successful company.
Not anymore.
And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here, because we've seen with Gillette, we saw it with Bud Light, we've seen it time and again when corporations tend to veer woke like this, it tends to go broke in the short term and they revert back to their previous style. But can you see a method to the madness?
No,
Esther, or
absolutely
not?
not. Here's the thing. This idea that all publicity is good publicity is not true, because Bud Light got a lot of publicity and they also lost about 30% of the value of their shares. And
Gillette was a total disaster.
Well, exactly. And so this idea that Jaguar has as a method to the madness, they're forgetting the people that usually buy it. Jaguar, like many cars, are lifestyle brands and they're associated with certain people. Jaguar is associated with upper middle class British women who don't want to look like asylum inmates, which is basically what the people in the advert look like. They don't want to look crazy. They don't want to look like they have nowhere to be and they're just bone idle. And the reality is Jaguar, this is the method to their madness, which is just madness. They're trying to pivot more towards electric vehicles. The shock they're going to have is the people that say, oh, this is great and everything, they either don't drive because they live in London, or they wouldn't buy Jaguars anyway. So they're alienating the people that typically would, whose consumer spending has gone down, because I don't know if people have noticed, but the British economy is going to pot. And it's just a crazy strategy all over. And who are they going to sell this to outside of British consumers?
Well, that's the question. I mean, Nerdrotic, the question for me with all these things, I remember as a long-time Gillette consumer, when they launched that ridiculous commercial attack basically on their male consumers, calling us all a bunch of wannabe Harvey Weinsteins until you proved otherwise. And it cost them $9 billion on the bottom line before they did a screeching U-turn back to the burly guys carrying little babies, making men feel good about themselves rather than criminal. And then we saw the thing with Bud Light, with that ridiculous Dylan Mulvaney campaign, which was completely the opposite of everything that Bud Light would normally be selling to their consumers, and they got the kicking it deserved. Is the same thing going to happen here, do you think?
Absolutely. The woke market has crashed. It's been pushed off for so long because the general populace of both of our fine countries have been done with this stuff for a long time anyway. And read the room. Look how much the world changed just in the last couple of weeks. The perception of the world with Donald Trump's re-election is people being done with this stuff. I was waiting for the punchline in this ad, because this could be the greatest troll ever if they come back and go, just kidding, and they show a guy about to shag a girl in a Jaguar. That'd be awesome, but that's not going to happen here. And they didn't even have a car in there. And when you're being trolled by Elon on Twitter, do you sell cars, by the guy who's outselling them? It's hilarious. So I love seeing this. I mean, go ahead and crash and burn at this point if you're going to be this dumb.
I mean, the guy, Rawdon Glover from Jaguar, said if we play in the same way that everybody else does, we'll just get drowned out. We shouldn't turn up like an auto brand. We don't want to necessarily leave all our customers behind, but we do need to attract a new customer. To which I would say, having owned Jaguars in the past, I mean, you are going to feel alienated if you're a Jaguar driver right now. You're going to think, I have nothing in common with this. This is not aimed at me anymore. They don't want people like me.
Well, rich people don't want to look crazy. I mean, like, poor people don't want to look crazy. So, I mean, what's going to happen to this CEO is he's probably going to be handed his P45 in the next few months, because that's exactly what happened with Red Bull that tried this sort of woke campaigning in 2020. They were fired. The CEO fired the entire team. I mean, when you replace your marketing team with asylum inmates and Canva, like, what do you expect? Why would any wealthy British woman, of which there are a reducing number of them,
well, you know what? We may be on the verge of true historic greatness here, where it may be in like 6 months' time we reconvene and Ernest has been proven right, and that doing such a extraordinarily weird campaign aimed at people like Ernest turned out to be a piece
who doesn't own a car, by the way.
Turned out to be a piece of marketing genius, and Ernest will have now bought 5 Jaguars off the back of it, as will all his mates. And you know what? You'll have the last laugh, Ernest.
Possibly. But what I will say is that I just think historically we have seen campaigns that when you look back at Apple, when you look at people who have done radical, wild things, some stuff don't work and some things do. But I think it's very interesting that the group that's so against cancel culture are so invested in killing this brand that's been around for decades over one silly ad.
I don't want to kill it. I just want to, like, cars are not cheap. I'm not going to.
I love the brand. Listen, I love the brand of Jaguar. I just don't. I actually want to help them, not kill them. I think it's. So we'll see. Anyway, we'll see, Ernest, whether you're proven right. I wouldn't put money on it, just to be. That's an FYI.
They're not going to go away. I mean, this is not going to be that bad. I think it's going to be okay.
Let's see. Let's turn to Wicked. So Wicked's the biggest movie in the world right now. It's taking nearly 150 million.
A woke movie doing great at the box office. Shocker.
What's that?
Shocker. I said shocker. You was, earlier
they've just made over $10 million over the amount they spent on it. That's not exactly.
Hang on, what's the point you're making?
No, but it could have flopped.
What's the point you're
making?
Barely
broken
it did
even.
Well.
Hang on. What is the point you're making, Ernest?
The point I'm making is
Let me
that
say this
I
thing.
find it interesting that there was this during the whole election cycle, there was all this talk about, oh, people are done with this woke marketing and this type of stuff, but it outpaced Gladiator at the box office. This very hyper-masculine film that was supposed to be the big juggernaut, but Wicked is doing numbers. People don't like musicals anymore, but all of a sudden people went to go see Wicked.
Okay, first of all,
Okay, well, hang
Gladiator
on.
is underperforming.
Hang on,
and
let me
secondly,
play-
they've just broken even.
All right,
They're not. They've just made the money.
What it
into
is indisputably doing well. I want to play it. This is very odd. This is like a mashup from the press tour from Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, who've been just behaving in a slightly odd manner.
Oz is so full of queerness and celebration and beautiful differences, and so is Earth.
This week, people are taking the lyrics of Defying Gravity and really holding space with that and feeling power in that.
I didn't know that was happening.
I've seen it, yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. I didn't know that was happening.
Every day in the Emerald City is a pride parade.
Oh my God,
right?
yeah.
I mean, look at
That's actually great.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Even like the chickens. Those
Snow
chickens
leopard with
are
the little
gay.
cape.
Now, Nerdrotic, it's all a bit weird. There's a suggestion there's a kind of wicked cult that's being developed here.
Well, there's always been a wicked cult, to be real, with the play that, full disclosure, I saw 20 years ago on a date with my wife. And it is patient zero for like the subversion of expectations, but this has had a fan base for decades. This was always going to do well if they made it close to the source material. And it was a film made for women and gay men, and they are going to see it in droves, and that's fine. That's the kind of film that should exist. For me, I just don't want Marvel to be wicked or Star Wars to be wicked. That's where the problem. This movie proves there's a difference between men and women. They both like different things. And not all women will agree, but they will definitely go see it. We saw it with Barbie. I would say Barbie was more hyper political than this. This is just a play where people break out in song. I did see it with my wife. It's the ninth circle of hell for me. I hate musicals, but I went because my wife has gone to a lot of superhero movies with me.
I'll probably take my daughter to see it. But Esther, today, hilariously, the British Board of Film Classification has issued a trigger warning on Wicked because of potential discrimination against green-skinned women and persecution of talking animals. The warning, issued on their website, states a green-skinned woman is mocked, bullied and humiliated because of her skin colour. A green-skinned woman!
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a green-skinned woman in the real world. Even Ernest knows there are no green-skinned women. Right, Ernest? Yes?
No, I agree.
Thank you.
I agree.
No, I'll come back to you, Ernest. I'll come
back.
back to you. I just wanted to get clarification. There are no green-skinned women in the world. Esther, why do we have to endure this
I
crap?
think, to be honest, I'm such a cynic. First of all, I also hate musicals. There's not enough money you could pay me to go and watch that film. But also, I think I'm the cynic in me is saying this is a PR move. This is saying, oh, slap something ridiculous on it so that the Daily Mail will pick it up, which it has, by the way. One of the most read newspapers in the country has picked it up. I don't think anyone's going to mistake the discrimination of green-skinned people, one, because it doesn't exist. I mean, why didn't they draw parallels with, yellow-skinned people with jaundice? It's ridiculous. They're doing this as a PR stunt.
And the persecution.
No one's going to be offended by
and
this.
Ernest, the persecution of talking animals, for God's sake.
Yeah, like Dr. Doolittle.
No, I think, to be honest, I think that trolling's on both sides, clearly. Clearly, they succeeded in what they knew was going to happen, right? That certain, publications that clearly look for stuff like this to get angry about, we're going to react in a way
It is
that they
not
did.
the British Board of Film
you have
Classification.
to get to a point where you have to
It's
look
not
at it and
their
say
job to goad people that they don't like. It's supposed to be a neutral organisation.
I think, right. True. But I think part of it is to start a conversation, right?
I bet
because
you they
a lot
were
of what
paid
goes on
a
in Wicked.
handsome sum to do this. I can guarantee there is some email chain somewhere in that organization that says we will give you a nice donation. It's obvious. There's no such thing as green-skinned people.
No, but you can't take it so literal. I think it's interesting. Like conservatives, far right, you all have imagination about other people all the time. about what they're doing and what they're not doing. But for whatever reasons, even in fantasy and joke and humor, you all don't even be able to be loose, like let go about that.
Ernest,
hang on.
Ernest, you do understand, Ernest, that just because people don't sign up to your very woke worldview, it doesn't make them automatically far right. I mean, you are aware of that, right?
No one is
Yeah.
offended by this. It's
I mean,
not
do you
like
think
it's
I have
Nobody
a
in this
woke
desk
world?
is
I mean,
far
you're
right.
making assumptions about my values. I'm not in this woke world. I think I'm in a very conscious world. I don't even use the word
Yeah.
woke
What does that
like
mean?
You mean
use
you're
it more
more
than I
awake
do.
than us because you've been so woke
Define
for
that,
so long?
please.
What do you?
I'm saying I'm more conscious. I have
Really?
more
Conscious.
compassion for
You think
different
you have a
people.
bigger conscience than the
I have
rest
more
of us?
compassion for different people.
Oh, shut up,
I would say
Ernest.
compassion for different people.
Really?
It's true.
No, you don't.
Yes,
No,
I
you
have
don't.
compassion for transgender people.
Do you have,
I have
okay.
compassion for
Okay.
people who
Do you-
look different
all right,
from myself.
Hang on.
So
Do
you're
you-
assuming
I have
we
compassion
don't?
for different folks.
Apparently, we don't have compassion for those
I think
people.
some of the
Fine.
things you all have said on this show proves that.
Do you have compassion for
I have
women?
compassion for green skinned people.
Do you have compassion for? Do you have,
Not Charlie.
do you have compassion for women in women's sport or not?
I have compassion for anyone in any sport.
Great. But if you had compassion for them, you wouldn't want trans athletes ruining the integrity of women's sport. Let's move on. I want to move on to something more serious. No, we're moving on, Ernest. You've had your say. You've called us all a bunch of uncompassionate, far-right lunatics, which I think is probably enough for one segment. Let me switch gears now to a more serious topic, but an interesting one. Band-Aid has been accused of perpetuating a white saviour narrative after Ed Sheeran told his followers he didn't approve of his vocals being used on the 40th anniversary re-release of Do They Know It's Christmas. Posting to Instagram, Sheeran shared a statement by Ghanaian-British musician Fuse ODG, who accused the campaign of dehumanising Africans and destroying our pride and identity in the name of charity. And I'm delighted to say that Fuse ODG joins me now. Fuse, welcome to Uncensored. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
It's a really interesting story, this. When I first read what Ed had said, I thought, hang on, come on. You can't attack Bob Geldof, Band-Aid, the whole thing, Live Aid. It was so fantastic. It did so much good 40 years ago. Why go after it? Then I read what you'd said, on which this is what Ed based his response on. And it did make me just stop and think. If I was currently living in Africa, would I want this narrative to keep playing out, given how thriving and successful large parts of the African continent have become? And I think that's really the point you were making, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Right.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, first of all, I think it's very important that, to recognise that the British public are a nation of givers. And, 1984, when the crisis started, the famine, it needed immediate attention. So I understand the sentiment behind helping that crisis. And in the short term, it made a lot of sense. There was great intentions behind it. There's a lot of efforts from the artists, Sir Geldof and the team. There was the intention to help something immediately. The perspective that I'm coming from is that fast forward 40 years later, right? I think there's a way to execute things, because in the midst of this act of kindness trying to solve a short-term crisis, we've created another crisis, which is the identity crisis, where for me, growing up in the UK, these kind of images really affected me to the point where I disconnected with being African. I was not proud of being African. And it's because of these kind of images that feeds, it just feeds a negative perception of the continent. And I just feel like, there's a way to solve a crisis without having to put down the people. So I'm just saying we just need a different model to allow us to solve a crisis, but still maintaining the dignity of the people. Because for me, I fall back in love with myself because I went back to Ghana, and I just want that child in school to just be themselves, and for other people to also see them as equal and just respect them. But I feel like images like what Band-Aid put out, it really, really destroys our collective pride and identity. And that's all I'm saying.
You know what? Yeah. You really did make me think. Now, Esther, you are also of Ghanaian heritage. Yeah. What's your response to that?
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, I was actually in Accra growing up when the 2004 single came out. And I remember me and my relatives were just like, what is this? I mean, I don't think you need to have children covered in flies or mud or take as sort of really quite dehumanizing pictures of people to appeal to people's sense of charity. It's not necessary. I've never seen a charity ad in the UK where you have like sort of British children going up chimneys with missing teeth.
All right, but hang on one second. All right, hang on. I'm going to jump in because I remember watching the original, it was Michael Burke, wasn't it? The original BBC report. And it was unbelievably powerful. And there was a genuine, absolute crisis going on in Ethiopia, right? With so many children just literally dying of starvation. And he was so angered by what he saw that visceral rage came out through the screen. He was able to control it, but you could see it and feel it. And Bob Geldof felt it, and he felt, we are going to do something about these kids, as you said, Fuse, in the short term. So I think there's probably two different issues here, right?
There is.
Because on the one level, I totally agreed with what they did at the time. On another level, I can understand why 4 decades later, in a far more prosperous Africa than there was then, I can understand why you feel the way you do.
There are better ways of raising money.
No, there is. It's possible to raise money without having to put those kind of images out. But I understand at the time, they had to put those kind of images in order for the public.
It did shock the world.
To shock the world. But I just feel like 40 years later, to still position Africa as a place of pity, it's just not, it's not constructive.
Well, what about the response from Bob Geldof? He said, no abstract theory, regardless of how sincerely held, should impede or distract from that hideous, concrete, real-world reality. There are 600 million hungry people in the world. 300 million are in Africa. We wish it were other, but it is not. We can help some of them. That's what we'll continue to do. Does he have a point, Fuse? I mean, you know, if half the world's hungriest people still live in Africa, what is wrong with him continuing to prick the conscience of prosperous people outside of Africa to help?
Yeah, just to put into context, 300 million people, there's 1.4 billion people in Africa, right? My issue is that there's a way that we can still help people without having to take away their pride and dignity. There's 95.5 million people that can't afford a proper meal in Europe. That's 1 in 9 versus 1 in 10 in Africa.
Right.
But somehow we're able to help and you know, bring these initiatives to help these people without having to destroy their pride and identity. And also, another issue that, you know, I like to point out is that, yes, there was a crisis happening and they needed, you know, an immediate solution to it. But it branded the whole of the continent as a place of famine and war and poverty and death. But it was just a crisis in one country. And I always give the example of, you know, Ukraine being in crisis and all of a sudden the whole of Europe is war-stricken.
Yeah.
You know, so we just have to be very careful with the way that we execute, because I understand the sentiment of wanting to help, because it's great to help, especially when there's a crisis. We all need to come together to help. But please, let's be mindful about how we actually execute these helps, because sometimes, well, in our scenario for Africa, it has crippled us over the 40 years. And I understand that in the short term, it helped. And, you know, I'm grateful that, you know, it helped at the time. But let's also look at what is caused now.
Let me bring in Ernest, because you've been nodding away here, Ernest. What do you think of this?
Well, I think, you know, everything he's saying is very valid and what's been said. I mean, I've been to Ghana and love the country and think that, you know, when I went to Ghana and what I saw in person and my experience there was nothing like the narratives I've seen growing up, watching stuff, you know, on TV and commercials. And I think about, you know, the fact of that impact, right? You said 40 years ago, we got a president, you know, elect that referred to African countries as shithole countries. And part of what he was thinking was the types of images that we've seen growing up of Africa being depicted in the type of way that it is. And so for me, it's like there's other ways to counter the narrative. I think that while it can be compelling to see people impoverished and all these things, if that is the bulk of the majority of the narratives that we're seeing visually of one particular area of the world constantly, even when we're not asking for charity, then you got to mix it up and do something better.
And I would say...
Let me bring in Nerdrotic, because you've been waiting patiently. What do you think of this debate, Nerdrotic?
I think it's interesting being an expert in Africa myself, never been there, but I would say
like the honesty.
Starving children should be the priority no matter where they are, and fixing that problem, pride, I would swallow that. I understand the perception. Maybe I think there's a reasonable conclusion we could come here. We could talk about the region maybe, and not, you know, because there's shithole countries. Definitely. It's not exclusive to Africa. There's shithole countries around the entire world.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, you're right. Starving children are the priority, right? But I'm thinking about my daughter right now. right? I want my daughter to step outside her house being proud of who she is. Imagine your daughter stepping out feeling like, you know, anything that represents her is poor, is famine, is death, is just nothing that's building her self-confidence. And as a result of this issue, I'm having to affirm my daughter every day, because I know when she steps out, the worldview of how people see her is not so great because of images like, you know, Band-Aid initiatives. So all I'm saying is that there's a way to execute this. I'm not just thinking about myself. Yeah, it's too late for a lot of us older ones who've disconnected with who we are. I'm thinking about my daughter. I just want her to be herself. I just want her to be proud of who she is. I want her to understand that she is more than what the world tells her. So I have to affirm her every day. So what I'm trying to say is that we've created an identity crisis as a result of trying to help something in the short term. And I understand we have to prioritize the people starving. But let's also think about the future, the next generation of leaders.
Okay, let me get Nerdrotic, because you wanted to respond to that.
I do. Well, as a father who's raised 2 boys, you know, I absolutely understand, especially one of them being special needs. I understand having to talk to your kid about being an individual and not having to kind of close out the world, and understand that the world is not going to cater to you because of this special need. And this is something you have to teach your kid individually as a father. I'm not going to tell you how to father, but I understand. I'm just saying there has to be some kind of compromise. To where maybe focus on the region, wherever that region is, and going, this region needs help, and do show pictures, because people aren't going to know if you don't. And it sucks to see that. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see starving children.
I'm so glad that you gave an example of your son, because you've been working so hard indoors, building his self-confidence. I've been doing that. A whole nation of us been doing that with our kids. But it's so hard when initiatives like Band-Aid come again, and it feels like it's setting us back, because it's 2024. We're supposed to embrace each other. We're supposed to uplift each other, not put each other down. There's a way we can execute this without putting ourselves down. And that's why I've even taken upon myself. We've launched an educational app that teaches Black history, so we can highlight Africa's contribution to the globe. So my daughter can understand that there's other representation of you that's been powerful, so you can be this powerful. We even have an affirmation tool for her to affirm herself. It's called School of New Africa. And this whole crisis has pretty much presented a situation where we've had to become the solution to it. Same way you've been working behind doors to be the solution to your child. I've had to bring the solution for my daughter, and I feel like we just all need to work together. If there's an issue, if there's a crisis, you need to allow the people that you're helping to lead the conversation, so it doesn't cause another crisis.
Should Ed Sheeran should his name be taken off the record as he wanted?
I think he should have asked for approval. I think that's just like common courtesy.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my argument is more an economic one, because ultimately I think there are better ways of actually providing the people that need the help. A lot of these big charities, they don't actually end up helping the people that need to be helped. They get swallowed up in administration and all of that. And I think a side effect of these kinds of images coming out of Africa, although they are important, you don't see parts of Africa as tourist destinations, which actually benefit private enterprise, that benefit people that actually have the ability to be able to benefit their local communities, not rich, corrupt politicians.
You know what, though, Esther, if Britain carries on down the road it's been going for the last few years, we might end up being on the subject of appeals from Africa to help their poor friends in England, because it's that bad. Right? We might have do the Brits know it's Christmas with pictures of starving little English kids in the street.
Cold pensioners.
Because there are lots of countries in Africa which are absolutely killing it right now, and they look at us and go, wow, what happened to you guys? So look, it's a great debate. Fuse, great to have you on Uncensored.
Thank
you very much for coming in. Send Ed my best. And good to have the rest of you. I want to end just by asking each of the panelists. It's Thanksgiving in America. Ernest, what are you feeling thankful for?
I'm feeling thankful for being alive and being able to be as outspoken as much as I can. That I still have my rights of free speech as long as I do, and hopefully I will in this next administration in 2025. So
I think you'll be fine.
I'm feeling optimistic about it. We'll see.
You will always have a place on this show to defend the indefensible. You know that. Esther?
Because it's not American.
Well, I'm grateful for good health and prosperity. I would say I'm grateful for free speech, but There are people in prison right now for Facebook posts, so I don't think that's going to last very long under Keir Starmer's Britain. But I'm just good. I'm grateful for a healthy family and, you know, the things that we take for granted.
Nerdrotic?
Grateful for my higher power and sobriety. I am grateful for the shift that's happening in America, and I will happily fight for Ernest's right to free speech every day, even if he's wrong.
Well, he usually is wrong, but I agree with you. I would too. And finally, and Fuse, finally for you, what are you feeling thankful for?
I'm just thankful for my health. I think being healthy is the most successful thing anybody can have in life. So yeah, that's it. That's the main thing. Without health, nothing else matters.
Well, you say that, but actually Arsenal's return to form
Oh, God.
is actually, for me, more important because it has a direct effect on my health. So when we had a little wobble last month, I felt ill. Now we're playing out of our skins again, and I feel radiantly healthy and buoyant and happy. So never underestimate the power of football, or soccer as Nerdrotic and Ernest would call it, to reinvigorate your health. Got to leave it there. A happy Thanksgiving to our American friends. And obviously over here we view all these things, these celebrations in America, a slightly different light. If it hadn't been for old mad King George, you would probably have King Piers now, and life could look very different for you guys over the pond. But there we are. You can't have everything. Thank you very much to my panel.
We're getting closer to it, though.
What's that?
King Piers.
So you can call me King
I said
Piers.
we're getting closer to it over here.
You can call me King Piers, Ernest, if you want. No problem. I'll call you Prince Ernest. Right, thank you all very much.
Cheers.